Okay, we're gonna quickly explain the rules of inference and how we're gonna use them, like to work with two-column proofs in symbolic logic. Um, well, I have a table in here that kind of like summarizes like the most important rules we're gonna need. Um, I have the titles in here of each one of the rules and basically like a quick explanation uh, using mathematical language to explain what basically each one of the rules is trying to tell you. These things that we have in here, like with the checks, are like the requisites that you need in order to use that inference rule. Usually, like in some textbooks, they just call them like premises instead of requisites. I kind of like will use the word requisite in this case because given that we're not solving an exercise, like we're not working on right now on a particular proof, then technically they're not like premises because we don't have them. The idea of premise is that you already know that this is true. In this case, I'm just like explaining the rules, so instead of calling them premises, I'm gonna call them requisites. Okay, like you need these two things in order to use the adjunction rule. Okay. Now I need to clarify something. These letters that you might see here, they may look like, well, you have a P in here and you have a Q in here, but that doesn't mean that you need to have those letters. It can be any letter, and you can use the rule. Doesn't matter which letter you have. Okay, the rules are not limited by the letters or like for the symbols. Like there is no negation in here. Like it has to be like positive. Like technically, like it has to be like positive P, something like that. But no, it's just like the rule only explains you what to do with two things that you have here. Okay, so let's try to explain them quickly. Okay, and then we're gonna talk about like how to use them to solve, well, to write two-column proofs. Okay, the first rule is adjunction. The adjunction basically just tells you how you can combine two things that you already know. Like as a requisite, if you have two things, you could put them together with the symbol and that's it. That's what we call adjunction. If you have two things, you can combine them with a symbol and. Okay, that's what you can do. The conclusion is basically what you can do once you have fulfilled the requisites. Now the addition. For the addition, you just need to have something. If you have something, you can put an or, and you can put whatever you want. Okay, it could be letter X, letter P, letter N, whatever. You can put or, and you can put anything that it wasn't on the original exercise. Like you can put whatever you want. That's what we call the addition rule. Okay, that's what the addition rule tells us. Simplification rule tells us that if we have an and, we can copy only one of the parts of the and that's okay. Like I could copy B if I want to. Obviously, you could copy Q, so that's how I explain it in this other case where I don't want to copy P, I want to copy Q, so that's it. Okay, you just copy the letter that you want as long as you have an and in here. If you have an or, then you cannot use simplification rule because the requisite is having an and sentence. Okay, the Morgan's law, they look kind of like confusing for most people. The way we can explain it, like only like to work, it's not like an explanation, it's just like how you could think about it is try using like distributive property, something like that. Like if you were multiplying with a minus, like minus times plus will give you minus and minus times plus will give you minus, something like that. Okay, it's kind of like an easier way to know what to do. It's not an explanation. I'm not explaining why this is this way, but it's an easier way like to work faster. Okay, so you use kind of like distributive property, and you always change the sign. So if you have an and, you're gonna change it with an or, and if you had an or, you're gonna change it with an and basically that's it. You use distributive property and kind of like that. That's kind of like the idea with the Morgan's law. Okay, so this first inference rules are basically like how to work with simple statements that you have and how to do some like basic stuffs with these things that you already know. Okay, now we're gonna talk about the rules that work with conditionals, and then a particular special case also of the disjunction. Okay. The other three rules are ponendo ponens. The correct name is basically modus ponendo ponens, but in this case I'm just kind of like saying ponendo ponens. Okay. Some people put modus pp or modus I don't know, like ponendo ponens or modus ponens. Some people say modus ponens. It's okay. Here we're gonna work with ponendo ponens. The requisites, remember that you always need to focus like, do I have these things? If I have them, then I can conclude this. Okay? The requisites are that you need to have two stuffs. One, a conditional, and the other thing, and this is important, you need to have the first part of the conditional. The letter might change. Like you could have R in here, so you need to have R. You could have, like, let's say negative R, for example, and you would have to need negative R. Like if you have the first thing of the conditional, then you can conclude the second one. As simple as that. If I have the first one, I can copy like the second one alone. I can conclude the second one. Because ponendo ponens basically tells you, the conditional tells you, if I have P, then I have Q. And obviously I have P, so it's kind of like obvious that you're going to have Q. Okay? I'm not going to try like to explain what they mean. Like I'm just going to explain how to work with them. Okay? Tollendo tollens is kind of like the opposite way of ponendo ponens. Like you have the conditional, but you don't have the second one. What you have is the opposite of the second one. If you have the opposite of the second one, then you could copy the opposite of the first one. Not the first one, but the opposite of the first one. And tollendo ponens is not working with a conditional. It's working with an or. Like you know that you have either, you have like, you could have P or you could have Q, but you don't have Q, so obviously you need to have P, like, because the or tells you that at least one of them you need to have them, so you don't have the other one, so you need P. You need to have P. The requisites are, you need to have an or and the negation of one of them, like, or the opposite, not the negation, the opposite, because if this one will be like negation, then you would need to have like the other one, like the opposite. Okay, so if you have an or and you have the opposite of one of them, then you can copy the other one. Kind of like some people say, like, I cancel this one and I copy the other one, kind of like that. Okay, or same way, like you have the or but you have the negation or the opposite, sorry, of the first one, for example, then I will have to copy the second one. Okay, these rules are kind of simple, like when you work with stuff like this one, so they shouldn't be that difficult to understand. Okay, so those are the basic rules of inference that we're going to work with.